when we talk about making mistakes and persistence. Now, the one that sort of surprised me was Michael Jordan. When I was doing research for this, I grew up watching Michael Jordan. I haven't watched an NBA game since Michael Jordan retired the second time. Because I'm not really an NBA fan, but I would watch Michael Jordan because he was exceptional to watch. And a lot of you, maybe not the college kids so much, you remember watching Michael Jordan in the 90s and the early 2000s playing basketball. He was exceptional. The guy could hit a shot and win the game. That's what we tend to remember, this buzzer beater, this miracle assist. That's what we remember when we think of Michael Jordan. But Michael Jordan did an interview where they asked him about his success, and he never mentioned those. He never mentioned the three-peat. He didn't remember the dream team. He said, I missed 6,000 shots in my career. I've lost 300 games, and this is the one that really got to me. He said, 26 times my team counted on me to make the game-winning shot, and I failed. And that just struck me because I don't remember Michael Jordan ever missing a shot like that because he was so good. He took those failures, he took those mistakes, he turned them into success, and that's what we remember now. You see, two of these three are sports. And I bet if you're thinking of other examples right now, you're thinking of somebody in sports who overcomes the odds, learns from their mistakes, goes on to be a champion. It's easy to, in sports, to think of that. But yet what we don't realize, to get to that same elite status of our own engineering careers, we have to adopt that same philosophy. It's no different if I can dribble a basketball or I can crunch numbers in an engineering problem. That same persistence has to be part of who we are, to take the mistakes that we've already proved that we're going to make and turn them into what we need them to be. Mistakes are kind of funny. They can lead you into two different ways. They can become your greatest success, or they can become your failures. You know, we saw some pictures of guys who made it success. We saw some pictures of engineers who let them become failures. The difference is your attitude as you go through it. And now, you know, I fully recognize I've probably lost you because you wanted a technical seminar, and this is very non-technical. But to get the technical stuff, we've got to understand this idea that attitude makes a difference with what we do. But you know what? You can't just stop and say, I would like all my mistakes to become a path to success. That'd be awesome if you can repeat that to yourself and it's going to work. That's not the case, though. So I put together this 4 steps to earn your success. And I love the word earn for a couple of reasons. One, it implies it's not given. You may not get successful making mistakes. There are real consequences to what we do. It also implies that there's an intentionality here, that you have to make some kind of effort to get to this point. So 4 steps to earn your success. Evaluate it. Now, this is the step that no one wants to do right now. In politics, in business, in any kind of leadership, they don't even touch this. There was a above-ground storage tank leak in Charleston, West Virginia, up near where I'm from, a couple years ago. And the owner of the company who owned these tanks was so fast to point out the blame for where this went that he ended up having to retrace his steps at least 3 times. And he never accepted the responsibility correctly for what had happened. That's because he didn't stop to evaluate it. It became so blatantly obvious he was just trying to move past this to assign blame or accept responsibility that he didn't even know what he was accepting responsibility of. No one stops to evaluate the conditions anymore. And yet I think it's so critical that we do this. And what I mean by this, at some point you're going to make a technical mistake. And if you're younger, you're going to make them. You're probably going to make them often. But even if you're older and you've moved into your career and you're doing contracts, you're laying out projects, or you're dealing with clients, now you have more people that you're interacting with. You can still make these mistakes. Okay, we're not just talking about getting numbers wrong. This encompasses all kinds of things that we do. You need to stop and figure it out. All right, you need to stop and understand what the problem is first. Sometimes that involves shutting your office door, coming in after hours. The point is, understand it. If it's a math error, good. Find out where you made that mistake. If it's a code violation or a code error, find the code and understand that code. If it's a problem with a person, understand what you did or what you said or how it was taken. If it's a contractual problem, figure out what you missed in that negotiation. The point is, wrap your head around it and don't stop until you get it. Because only once you've done that can you truly acknowledge what the mistake was. The biggest mistake you can make in making a mistake is to acknowledge the wrong thing. Acknowledge that you made an error when you really didn't in fact. Maybe it goes back to a constraint issue. Maybe you talk about that mental capacity and you think back to what was going on in your life at that time and you cut yourself a break because something was happening to you mentally that drained you. But only once you evaluate it and you fully understand it can you then acknowledge exactly what had happened. And this looks like a few different things. Acknowledge it to the person that the mistake affected, to the owner, to your teammates, somebody in your company. Just make sure you're acknowledging the correct thing. Once you do that, you've evaluated what happened, you understand it completely, you've acknowledged the proper aspect of it, then you gotta release it. I think this is the hardest one. You want to talk about millennials and you want to talk about the younger generation, they have a really hard time with this. They don't release them, they kind of internalize it. That's just who they are. That's kind of how they were brought up. It's just a different way of looking at things. They're used to being perfect. They're used to getting all the gold stars. And this hurts when they make mistakes. As managers and as leaders, we have to instill in them, it's okay to release that from yourself. You are not defined by those mistakes. Never repeat it. Now, this is the other one too that kind of, you always hear, I'll never make the same mistake twice. Well, you're going to make the same mistake probably twice in your career. All right? I guarantee you, while Michael Jordan missed 26 game-winning shots, I guarantee you at some point he said, I'm not going to miss another game-winning shot, but he even knew he was going to at some point. The point here isn't that you won't make the same mistakes, it's that you're never going to make the same mistakes in the same way. You're never going to allow that to be something that defines you. So let's say it's some error in calculations. Now you may make another error in calculations at some point, but you will never make that same mistake in that same way. And this is an internal thing. This is what you call the heart of a champion. This is the guy who does not quit. This is the Michael Jordans of our profession. When he missed that game-winning layup, it's not that he wasn't ever going to miss a shot again, but I can guarantee you with the research I've done about Michael Jordan, he was back in the gym that next day hitting that same layup a million times. So he knew that that was going to be one way that he would never fail again. The point is that you're never going to not make another mistake. It's just you will do what you have to do to make sure you never make it in the same way again. So here's where we get to the good stuff. This is where I want to talk about our companies and our teams and the people that we interact with. Because believe it or not, good teams make good mistakes and bad teams make bad mistakes. That's essentially what I hope to leave you with today, is that you can create a team and a company that learns and grows and makes good mistakes. The 3 traits, well, let me pause for a second. This isn't engineering at all. As a matter of fact, for the rest of the presentation, it came from my brother, who at one point was a Special Forces officer in the United States Army. And I got to spend some time with him this summer, and we were having a beer, and I told him about this presentation. He said, well, I gotta tell you some of the stuff that we do. And if it works for the United States Special Forces, I think it'll work for us engineers. The 3 traits of a good team are employee empowerment, the right people in the right places, and a culture of quality control. Now, I was at a conference a couple years ago, and the guy was giving a whole presentation on empowerment. And I had a conversation with him afterwards, and I thought he was so wrong with his philosophies. His idea of empowerment was to delegate tasks to lesser employees, delegate tasks based on employees' ability. I don't agree. See, empowerment to me is much more than just delegating away tasks. Empowerment reveals the true potential of your teammates and your employees. Okay, empowerment is about meeting the needs and revealing the potential. And this is critical because on your team, you don't want people to do stuff. You want people to take ownership and to be part of your team and to be an element of why your team is successful, not just do what you want them to do. The key, I believe, in any relationship, if you're talking about networking with colleagues, you're talking about friends, you're talking about your employees, is you have to understand what their greatest challenge is. If you look at your team right now and you don't know where your people struggle, internally, personally, I would argue you probably don't know much about it. Because it's really easy to understand if you just build that relationship with somebody, where their greatest challenges are. Maybe they're having a hard time speaking in meetings. Now, you need them to speak in meetings, but if you know that's their greatest challenge, you can help work with that, again, to reveal their potential. Maybe they're overwhelmed by the technical aspects of their job and role, but if you don't understand that, they're never going to get over that. They're going to internalize it, and they're going to struggle, and they're not going to be an effective part of your team. Empowerment. I know it's a buzzword. There's 1.5 million books written by business consultants to talk about what empowerment is. It's really simple. It's coming away with their needs and meeting their needs. When you are empowering your employees, you are meeting their greatest needs. Now, we've all seen this. This is in Psychology 101, if you've ever taken any of that. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It starts in the bottom there with your physical stuff, food, water, shelter. And as you build up, your safety is met, your self-esteem is met. And I would argue that real empowerment tries to get to the very top there. Self-actualization. People who understand themselves, their strengths, their weaknesses, they succeed. And why that's important when we talk about mistakes and creating good teams is it's only when people hit that level are they truly passionate about what they're doing. And in your teams, or in your companies, I mean, you guys have all seen somebody who doesn't function at this level. It's hard. It's hard to get them to be part of it. It's hard to motivate them. Everybody at some point wants to get to this, and possibly, if you have that individual or that team that is not functioning on this level, maybe next time you go to hire, you need to start thinking about that. Maybe the hiring process should not be, tell me your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. It should be you trying to figure out, do they fit into your system of what you need? When they are at the level where they are self-actualized individuals and they get it, are they going to be performing in the way that you need them to be? But that leads into creating the right kind of team. See, I've worked for 4 different companies in the years I've been in this profession. I've seen some companies that do it really well, but I've seen a lot of companies that follow this. You get an engineer. That engineer is really, really good. He's got all the skills you need him to have. He understands codes. He's diligently working. He stays after hours. He gets the project done. He sounds intelligent. He can logically work through a problem. That's really great. So what do? You promote him to a manager. Now you make him in charge of other people. Now he's not doing what he does really, really well. So he limps along, and maybe of all your managers, you've got 1 or 2 that they do it better than the other guy. They're good engineers, now they're managing fairly well. So you put him into a leadership role. Now he's running your company, or now she's running your company. And the problem here is those 3 different categories of people are 3 completely different types of individuals. Those are 3 different personalities, 3 different skill sets that make them successful in those positions. We've got to stop, in my opinion, stripping good engineers from doing engineering and making them managers. Now, there is an argument to be made that have everybody on this list here have an engineering background. Certainly, I think that there's enough uniqueness about our profession that it's helpful to have engineering backgrounds in all these positions. But you know, engineers are not cut from a mold. Just because we all went to engineering school does not mean that some of us aren't good at business, some of us aren't good at people, some of us aren't, good at doing math. I mean, I know plenty of engineers that graduated that I wouldn't sit in an outhouse that they designed. The point is, there are different skill sets, even with people with engineering backgrounds, and if you want to have the right kind of team, you've got to change that philosophy. You've got to stop taking your best technical people and turning them into people. That's where you're going to start seeing people that are not functioning at their highest abilities and levels. I would argue, because I've seen it work, where instead of setting up a company where the business leaders are the highest paid, most responsible, and the engineers are below project managers, you're creating an incentive system where people don't want to do what they're really good at doing, because everybody wants to get paid. They want to work, for the most part, they want to get more responsibility, and they want to move the ladder. There was one company that I saw that had abandoned that model. They hired only engineers for the most part, except for some of their specialized positions, marketing and accounting and things like that. But their engineers were free to progress on an engineering track. They attended the seminars, they got the master's degrees, they got the education that allowed them to become the chief engineers, the chief technical officers of the company, the managers, the people that can handle, the people that could do that soft stuff of revealing potential, of empowerment, things like that. They were put in the positions where they could lead people, but they were not required to lead projects. And lastly, you have that third category where people who, you don't need to have everybody be the business guy in your company. You need to have one or two that set the course for the ship and take everybody on. My last point regarding this is to create a culture of quality control. Now, here in this room, how many people have a quality control manual as part of your company? Right. I've worked for 4 different companies. As I said, 3 of them had a formalized quality control procedure and checklist, and I think I probably completed it twice. Because what happens is you get to the end of the project, and maybe I would put it through the QC program or the QC checklist, but I was still doing design work on it. And I think that happens more often than we want to realize, or we just sort of scribble through the checklist and it's not really working. I would argue that if you want to create good teams that make good mistakes, you need to create a culture among your team of quality control. And you do this is straight from my brother. I take 0 credit for this. Create an all-for-one and a one-for-all attitude. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's an engineer and 2 technicians, or it's, you're the president of one of the largest companies in America. You have to instill that you are all in it together. There is not one single individual among your team. And when you have that confidence, you're free to make those mistakes that you can learn from. It's when that person, or that young engineer, or even that manager feels as though they are on their own, that they do not feel that they are free to learn from their mistakes. The second thing is the freedom to communicate and question processes. This is a tough one for engineers. We like our processes, we like our procedures, and those of us that run companies like to have what we know has worked. But again, you talk about the younger generation here, and if you want to turn off a millennial faster than anything, give them a procedure for how they have to act, and you won't get any production out of them. Now, they might be good employees, they might do what you're asking, but you're not going to see them progress, and the first chance they get, they're probably abandoning ship on you. Let them communicate and question processes. Assume you are putting your engineers in the higher degrees of engineering, you're putting your managers into management positions, and your business leaders into business leadership positions. Allow them to question norms. They bring something new to the table. This creates that culture of quality control. They're bought into that process now, and that is so huge if you're trying to move people in a direction, is to get buy-in from them. Lastly, instill that there are no failures, just learning experiences. You can say this 1.5 million times, but if you If you don't act it once, you could say it a million more and your people don't get it. You have to again, it goes back to creating that all for one attitude. And you act that. You don't say it, you act that. There are no failures, there are just learning experiences in my team, my company, my department, whatever it is. When you do this, you create a culture where your people are bought into the process of making your projects better, making your company better. So I leave you with 3 takeaways for what we've talked about today. Mistakes happen. They're gonna happen. You're probably gonna make them, and if you haven't, I don't know. I've never met anybody who hasn't met one in what we do. Mistakes are essential to becoming success, and great teams make great mistakes, and bad teams make bad mistakes. But there is one secret to making this work in your company, your team, and I'm selfishly gonna make you email me to figure that out, and I'll be happy to respond with what that is. We've reached near the end of our presentation, and I want to take a second, because we're gonna open it up for questions here in a minute. And I want to tell you the story of how this came along. I had to present to a business group a story about my career, and I could think of nothing. And I had a friend who said, well, just tell us something funny that happened. This was non-engineers. This was a pure business group of all kinds of individuals. And I just happened to remember the story where I got caught reading the tape measure wrong and got filmed on Modern Marvel, so I told it, and it resounded across all the different professions that were represented. And I had some friends that said, you need to write this down, so I did. And it was published in Modern Steel Construction. And it was a huge honor to be published in Modern Steel. It really was, I loved it. But the coolest part of the whole process happened in the week after that magazine came out. I got emails from all over the US with people just sharing stories about the dumb stuff that they did when they were young. And and what was kind of sad in a way is I got 2 or 3 from guys who were presidents of the company and said, I've never taught my young engineers about that time I did blank. And I realized we've got to start talking about this. If we want to teach our young engineers that it's okay to learn and to grow, we've got to share our own stories, because I know if I've made them in 13 years, then there's a lot of other mistakes sitting here in this room and in our profession. So I leave you with a quote before we do this, that success is not owned, it's borrowed, and rent is due every day. So I think he's going to open up the questions. I would also like to add, not just questions, but if you have a lesson learned, especially if you can beat getting caught on the show holding a tape measure wrong, I would love to hear it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. We've got plenty of time for questions, so we'll just open it right up. Richard?
What was your solution to your drafting problem where you made the holes too small?
I'm glad you asked that. I meant to include that. So the plates arrived at 7:30 on a Friday night. I saw there was a problem. After I got through my panic, I went to the tool shed and I asked the guy who had all of our tools to teach me how to use a bolt reamer. And I was fully prepared to sit there through Friday night and remount holes in those plates. And what was really cool about it is the superintendent of the night shift was watching this happen. And he watched me just to the point where I was ready to turn on that reamer, and I think he knew I was probably going to break my arms trying to do that. And he came over and he said, I just wanted to see if you really felt bad about doing this. Go home, my guys will take care of this. And at 7:30 that next morning when I showed up, all the plates were done. So that's where that earned your success. That came straight out of that story, is just be willing to fix it, even if it means something you don't really know what you're doing.
So I'm still a very young engineer. I just entered the profession about 1.5 years ago, and I don't have, any huge stories about, making a mistake on television, but this is more about the culture at my company. From day one, my boss has always said, my job isn't to keep you from making mistakes, it's to keep you from making too big of a mistake. And so from day one, I had that confidence that, okay, you know, I'm allowed to make mistakes, and it gave me that confidence to go and ask questions and do what I want. So I agree with you that mistakes are good, and companies should always tell their employees it's okay. So,
You're in a good company.
yeah.
All right.
Excellent, thank you.
Questions?
Just to kind of share something similar to what you're saying, in the company that I work for, my former boss had a good quote that I'll continue to remember. This being, whenever there was an air raid, we had an attorney that was quick to come to kind of make you look bad. I mean, kind of like point it out to you that you really messed up. And his response to that was, you have to do something to make a mistake. And I thought that was an excellent reply to that, because it's, you know, if you're not actually doing something, there's no way you're going to make mistakes. And for that man to make that comment to him, I thought that was a perfect response. And
Yeah.
I think that's a good lesson to learn from that.
Absolutely, thank you.
I just wanted to share something from another profession, is that there's a pretty well-known hospital in Massachusetts, and they've instituted a program of having somewhat secret meetings of the doctors, nurses, and the medical professionals getting together on a regular basis to share times when they've given wrong medication, made errors in surgery, and that these things, are remain completely secret over the years, but they realized that not only would people reduce their stress level, but also that this would be a teaching moment, and a really critical teaching moment for their hospital as a whole.
Absolutely, thank you, yeah. I mean, humility goes so far to just say when you messed up. I wish as engineers we did it more often, to be honest.
So the last part of the creed says we should again seek divine intervention, divine inspiration. That's what we had during the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at closely into the Bible says you can forgive somebody 7 times, 77 times.
Mm-hmm.
So it means that the mistakes are
Yeah.
acceptable.
Yeah, yeah.
So as we just how to make something better out of that.
Right. Well, yeah, and I know the passage you're talking about, and I think that philosophy of forgiving 7 times 7, you know, the what's tricky is that our clients and the public are not so quick to forgive us, but in our companies and in our teams, we can certainly institute that type of philosophy. And again, I think it goes back to what I laid out earlier, is that allowing the little mistakes is what prevents the big ones from occurring. So.
I have a question. Based on your experiences, what classes do you think should be added to engineering curriculums that maybe weren't included? I don't know.
I promise I did not pay her to say that. I'm actually developing a course that I would love to see get instituted, just talking about failures in case studies and things like that. I think that it could be a huge addition to our college professions or our college tracks if we added some of that stuff. And I would like to take that, and at least the way I envision it happening, and look at some of the successes too. Because I think one of the biggest things that we're not teaching is the open-ended, just figure it out. You know, we're teaching codes and we're doing a great job of teaching the numbers, but we're losing what made us all interested in engineering to begin with, which was that open-ended, you know, how did they build the pyramids? Let's just venture and talk about it and figure it out. Maybe we can't come up with the right answer, but we can explore a lot of different ways that it was possible. And I think that's something we're lacking in our education. And it's a tough problem because we have tougher codes, there's a lot more to learn, and there's a lot of other breadth credits that we have to do now. But I think that's what we need. We need to have some open-ended stuff, and we need to talk about our failures, case studies.
What do you do when you're dealing with the situation where you have the second mistake of the same kind, or the third mistake of the same kind?
Yeah, so that's where we get into the management stuff. And that's where there's a reason that individual or that team or whatever is continuing to make those types of mistakes. Now, there is good employees and there's bad employees, and that's tough to say. There's good engineers, there's bad engineers. You know, at some point, if you've tried to develop that employee as best as you can, you know, that's tough. You know, that has to be going into that hiring decision. You should not just be hiring GPAs and available candidates, although sometimes that's what you need to do.